Good evening and welcome to Stones and Thrones. My name is Nicholas A. Venna and this is my show. I analyze and talk about current events in society, culture, and political news in pursuit of the good things to which we can hold fast and build upon, stone by stone, until like-minded individuals and myself have thrones that last. Occasionally, I'll be responding to stones that are thrown at me, and sometimes I'll be throwing some stones of my own. It is Monday, July 20th, and we've got several topics tonight, but worth mentioning, it is the feast day of the prophet Elijah, also the feast day of St. Margaret of Antioch, who's also known as Marina the Demon Slayer, and is known as the patron saint of the falsely accused. Topics we want to get into today. Ben Shapiro slams Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, and Candace Owens for defending, quote, Muslim pornographers, end quote, Andrew and Tristan Tate. Then he goes on to say Judaism opposes pornography and finds it a sin. So that's what Ben Shapiro insists. And what I thought was, this is the perfect opportunity to illustrate just how cynical and disingenuous and insincere this whole industry is. Okay? So let's just go back a little bit. We do know that for however long Ben Shapiro has been preaching and, or at least giving the impression that he espouses these conservative family values that are actually Christian, not Judeo-Christian, they're just Christian. The Jews and the Christians were never getting along and talking about their shared constitution rooted in the Decalogue. In fact, Jesus is dead precisely because of the violations, not the least of which was don't bear false witness. Isn't that the lie that put the Messiah to death? Okay? And that pattern of behavior, it never changed. They lied in order to try to have him prosecuted in the middle of the night, and then their own witnesses contradicted each other. Then they lied to Pilate about what it was that they wanted Jesus put to death for. Then when Pilate didn't want to execute him, they threatened to lie to Caesar about Pilate's motivations for not wanting to impose the death penalty. After the death penalty was imposed, they were afraid that people would come steal Jesus from the grave and then claim that he had raised from the dead, because they were fully aware that he had made that claim. And then when he did raise from the dead, they lied about that too, knowing they lied about it. The actual events were witnessed to by the guards from the Sanhedrin that were put in front of the tomb. And then the Pharisees and the Sadducees lied about that. They instructed these guards to lie about it. They went through the crowds during the prosecution of Jesus when Pilate was saying, do you want me to release Jesus to you because it's that time of the year and I'm going to release a prisoner? They were paying people say, no, we want Barabbas, not Jesus. Then, after the resurrection, they went around and started telling everybody that these people are crazy and that they're lying. Then they went to the apostles and said, you can't preach in the temple anymore. The apostles said, we can listen to you or we can listen to God. Easy choice. Then all throughout the book of Acts, in every region that Paul goes to where he preaches and there are believers and he forms a new church, they make up stories about them there too, okay? It is their own conduct that led Rome to eventually, roughly 35 years later, destroy the temple again. It wasn't the Christians' conduct that resulted in that. It was the members of the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. It was their conduct that led to the destruction of the temple. So there's no one to blame for the destruction of the temple except for the people who were running the temple, except for the people who wanted the revolutionary Barabbas back and continued to revolt. Plus, the idea that you could say, oh, like the Christians and the Jews, even that is misleading and dishonest. They were all Jews. And what I mean by all, prior to the revelation coming to Peter that salvation was going to be available to the Gentiles on account of the rejection by the Jews of their own Messiah, and again, by the Jews, here's something that needs to be clarified. I don't know how people forget this. I don't know how they ignore it. I don't even think they forget it. I think they don't even stop to think about it. Peter, a Jew. James, a Jew. The other James, a Jew. John, Jew. Andrew, Jew. Matthew, Bartholomew, Jew. Jude, not the one we call Judas, the other Jude. A Jew. All 12 apostles were Jewish. Okay? So the expression the Jews is referring to the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and collectively that group of people who rejected the Messiah. But the bloodline was still Jewish. These were native Hebrew speakers. Paul wrote a letter to the Hebrews. I mean, what else do we need here? Okay, like what else do we need here? Every place Paul went to preach, there were both Jews and Gentiles that were converting. That's why the Council of Jerusalem came to be, because there was a dispute between the Greeks, these Gentile converts who believed in the message of Jesus, and the Jews who believed in the message of Jesus, and disputes over what gets carried over from the old practices of the Jews. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you hear these narratives, all right? There is no Judeo-Christian. It was the Christians who upheld the Ten Commandments, not the Jews. It was the Jews who were committing the murders and then soliciting the support and the employ of the Romans to commit these murders, not the Christians. And remember, the Christians were also made up of Jews. It was Jews and Gentiles. So the blood that exists even in the, quote, Jews of today, as has been the case for the last 2,000 years, is the blood that was in all 12 apostles, one of whom hung himself and was dead right away, Judas, the betrayer. So anyway, keep that in mind as you listen to these things like Ben Shapiro slams Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, and Candace Owens for defending Muslim pornographers, Andrew and Tristan Tate. Judaism opposes pornography and finds it a sin, Shapiro insists. Really? Okay, well, let's take a look, Ben. And mind you, he has not changed. This is who he's been the whole time, okay? The whole time. The level of deception is staggering. It's very non-Christian Jew, frankly. I'd say it's very Jewish, except for the fathers of the church were Jewish. The first pope was Jewish. The writers of the Gospels were Jewish. The main actor who opened up all the churches, who was the key figure in the book of Acts, who was the greatest apostle, known as St. Paul, his name changed from Saul because he came from the family of kings, Saul being the first king back in the Old Testament, all Jews. I'm more Jewish than Ben Shapiro is. Like, get that through your head. I am more Jewish than Ben Shapiro is. Let that sit. So, let's take a look. How is Ben Shapiro the quintessentially perennial deceiver? Well, if you take a look at Ben in 2001, you can Google him, actually. If you just Google Ben Shapiro 2001, AI gives you an overview. It says, in 2001, at the age of 17, Ben Shapiro made headlines as the youngest nationally syndicated columnist in the United States. I wonder how that happened. No doubt it was organic. That same year, he began writing for his campus paper while starting his university studies, quickly establishing a prominent voice in conservative media. He launched his career with several notable milestones that year. He was the youngest syndicated columnist. He was picked up by Creators Syndicate. He began writing a weekly political column that was published in outlets across the country. He wrote for the campus as a 16-year-old. Starting his undergraduate degree at UCLA in 2001, he was active in campus politics, wrote pieces on Middle Eastern geopolitics for publications like the Daily Bruin. Unsurprising. Early media profile. His early syndicated work and media appearances centered on his critiques of modern university systems, laying the groundwork for his later career as a founding member of the Daily Wire. Okay, there's an overview. Well, let's go on. Here's an article, May 28th, 2001, Ben Shapiro. That year. Ben Shapiro is a first-year philosophy student bringing reason to the masses, and it gives you his email, okay? And here's what he has to say. Mind you, 25 years ago, okay? 16 and 17 years old. These are his politics back then. There are not always two sides to a story. Sometimes there's only truth and falsehood. The Israeli, quote, Palestinian conflict is one of these cases. Many organizations on campus have bought into the Arab myths, including the Daily Bruin, which repeatedly prints anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic articles, and will surely do so in response to this column. With USAC's voting down of a resolution to condemn Zionism and Israel, it showed good sense and courage. But how did that racist resolution ever get on the agenda? That resolution shouldn't have had to be voted down. It should have been immediately struck down from the agenda. Enough is enough. It's time to set the record straight about what actually happened and what is a concoction of the Arab propaganda machine. Keep in mind, Arabs are Semites. Okay? Arabs are Semites. Do you think of all the things that the ignorant, hardly as educated as he would seem to be, and only a fraction as smart as he claims to have been and everybody else said that he was? I went to high school with a Jewish kid who didn't even believe in God, who was way smarter than Ben Shapiro, who was writing stuff like this when he was in high school with way more sophistication. So he's just not that smart. This is not a good column. This is naked propaganda that a 12-year-old could write. But where is he learning all of this stuff? Like, what's his experience at 16 and 17 years old? How does he know that it's a completely concocted narrative? Does he not know that Arabs are Semites? Did nobody teach him that? Or was he a propagandist from the beginning? I'll put forth that he absolutely knew. This is a snarky, elitist, silver spoon, shadow-backed punk since he was a kid, rattling off the talking points that he's been given. Like, he goes on. The history of the situation is clear and unequivocal. Since the destruction of Jewish rule in Israel 2,000 years ago. Nick Fuentes just did a great show on this. He said, you have to learn to read. Pay attention to the words, okay? Pay attention to the words. He calls Arabs anti-Semites, even though he knows Arabs are Semites, because he is a race supremacist. Ben Shapiro is a race supremacist, okay? Hitler would blush at the audacity at the hubris of people like Ben Shapiro, because their form of race supremacy is so intense that they will even call people who are their race, who are Semitic, anti-Semites, simply because they're not part of his bloodline. Okay? So when he says, since the destruction of Jewish rule in Israel over 2,000 years ago, let's make something clear, Benny. The Jews didn't rule Israel 2,000 years ago. The Romans did. That's why you guys needed permission to kill Jesus. That's why you needed permission to kill your king. Okay? You had to ask permission from your superiors, the Romans, who beat you. You guys beat yourselves all throughout the Old Testament. So even for the Pharisees who actually followed the Old Testament as we see it today, the Septuagint with the apocryphal books, even they knew they were writing down the history. Okay, you got beat multiple times. The temple had already been destroyed and rebuilt. Oh, why? Because you violated the Ten Commandments? Because you guys abandoned God? How many times do we have to listen to people say, bless Israel and you'll be blessed, but curse them and you'll be cursed? What about when Israel curses itself? Does anybody curse Israel more than Israelis? Does anybody curse the Jews more than the Jews do? Does that make me an anti-Semite when I point out, am I a racist if I say that black on black crime is more prevalent than white on black crime? Am I a sexist when I say that women hate women more than any man could ever dream to? Am I an anti-Semite when I say that the Jews curse themselves more than any other race? Because it's all true. These are factual statements. They're empirical. You can measure them like you can measure numbers. You can weigh them in the scales. Some on this side, some on that side. One side drops, the other goes up. It's objective. The criteria is objective. It's not personal. It's not subjective. It's objective. Anybody observing can see this is how it pans out. Israel didn't rule Jerusalem. The Jews didn't rule Israel. The Sanhedrin had some authority granted to them by their rulers, the Romans, and they needed permission to do anything big. They needed permission. That's why they asked Pilate for permission. They begged him. They begged, borrowed, and stealed, right? They had to bribe. They had to threaten. All that stuff. When they went to Pilate and said, oh, change the inscription. Don't put that he's the king of the Jews. Put that he said he was king of the Jews. How did Pilate respond to that request? Go fuck yourselves. What I wrote is what I wrote. That's just the Roman way of saying go fuck yourself. Did it seem like they had authority there? You know what else is not surprising? The disposition. The fact that you could go to a guy, a Roman governor, who has more authority than you, more power than you, and is ruling the area that you're now for 2,000 years telling everybody else you used to rule when you didn't. You go to the guy who you had to beg on your knees and then pay all of your own people to lie. You had to bribe them all to call for the crucifixion of their own Messiah. And yet it doesn't click to you like, you have no power here, Gandalf the Grey. You have no power here. It's like, nah, actually, they do. Pilate had some power. You go to him, you had to beg him, and then you go and say, no, don't do that, do this. Can you even imagine, like, what is Pilate thinking? Is just like, dude, you guys are the scum of the earth. You are lying shitbags, okay? You lost, you're pathetic. You guys are the source of all the unrest in this region. You are the reason that Caesar wants to burn the place to the ground. You brought me an innocent person, begged me on your knees to crucify him, and then when I didn't want to do it, you threatened me with I guess you threatened to lie to Caesar. You threatened to lie to him like a bunch of bitches. And now you're just, the audacity, the gumption, where it's just like, they just forget so quickly, right? Isn't that like the same situation with this Iran war? Isn't it just crazy? Like, you just go there a year ago in the middle of negotiations and you drop these massive bombs on them. Okay, what justified, not justified, like, you're still operating in a completely untrustworthy and dastardly way. You say you're going to be negotiating, and then you bomb them in the middle of it. Then you tell all of your own American people that it's done. Had to be done, and that's why you did such a dastardly thing. That's why you're basically a liar, and you can never be trusted around the planet again. Like, no one will ever trust you again. But you had to do it because it was a one and done. So somehow it was justified. The payout justified this shameless deed of betrayal and deception, ruining the reputations of the United States to negotiate. Then, after lying to your own people, a year later, you go right back to war. This time even more aggressively than you did the last time. And you start out the war by saying, well, no, first you just attack. You kill the supreme leader, you kill the head of this nation and the head of one of the world's top two most populated and most populous monotheistic religions. You basically kill the Pope of the Shiite branch of Islam, the militant, radicalized version of it. Again, okay, maybe you have some justification for that. But then the audacity to go back and say, now we want to negotiate. Why would they ever negotiate with you? Why would they ever negotiate with you? It reminds me of these women who go out and they initiate divorces with men who they've never even had an overt argument with. Men they're just like cheating on, or they think they have the opportunity to cheat on, or that they just never really valued and used for money and whatever else. No regard for a family or anything else that these men provided and paid for, labored and struggled for, sweat from their brow for, fought for, some cases even died for, although you don't have to divorce them when they're dead. Sometimes they kill them. But these women go in and then they initiate a divorce. And the thought process is like, well, I want the house. I believe I should have the house. So I'm going to go get a restraining order. I'm going to falsely accuse them of domestic violence, have them removed by a court order in a hearing that takes like 30 seconds, that judges just rubber stamp. Lawyers fucking love it because it's so profitable. But to the complete and utter destruction of the family, destruction of children. And then after they do this, then they come and they sit down with their fucking smug lawyers. And then their lawyers sit down and it's like, all right, now let's negotiate. Well, we got the house, we got all the kids. Yeah, we lied. We want some money. But let's settle this like civilized people. And then it ends up just bankrupting the entire family estate. It's the same tactic. It's the same hubris where like you can do the most dastardly, just disgusting, degenerate, atrocious things to your own family, to your own children, to your own wealth, to the benefit of these lawyers who fucking hate you, who look at you like you are a pathetic whore. Because remember, these lawyers have jobs. These moms that roll in there don't. That's the tactic. You got no job, you got no money, you never really actually did anything. You're already fucking somebody else. You already want to go start a relationship with someone else. You think you're more valuable than you are. You hold yourself in higher esteem than anybody else does. The ignorance and the stupidity. You walk into a lawyer's office, tell them how much money your husband has, then that lawyer tells you they believe you, and you think that they're serious? How fucking stupid could you be? There are no limits. For anybody who's seen this happen, you know that's a rhetorical question, because there's no limit to how fucking stupid these people can be. These bitches are fucking stupid. They destroy themselves. They destroy their children. They destroy all the wealth in their families. And then they go fucking cry and prostitute themselves after that. They go shack up with fucking men who are like 25 years older than them on, with oxygen tanks and wheelchairs. And then live a shittier life than what they ever could imagine. I mean, the only winners in these situations are the men who are liberated from these bitches, because they've generally been so focused on building families, building wealth, and caring about children, and thinking about how they can make the world a better place, that they just didn't even realize that all the dead weight sitting at home all day that they knew wasn't doing shit. They just didn't realize that this person could be doing nothing, and then at the same time view themselves and hold them in such a way and hold themselves in such high regard. It's very Jewish. It really is it's a very Jewish thing to do. That's why there are so many Jews in law. There's so many Jews in family law, and this is how they operate. It's a cultural thing. You could say things about black culture, and the Jews do, make no mistake about it. The Jews of today do comment on black culture. They comment on Hispanic culture. They comment about white Christian women. They would never do it on their own, because their own are not that stupid. They're not allowed to be that stupid. They don't let it happen. They only preach the, liberation theology of female worship and stupidity. They only preach that to everybody else. They don't do that to their own communities because they wouldn't allow it. They would never find themselves in court like that because they know that the whole thing's a sham anyway. So they do it in culture. They do it in politics. They do it on a national level with their own country, and they do it with their lobbying. This concept of, oh yeah, I'm just going to come in and do like this horrible dastardly thing. And it's worth mentioning that that is part of the culture. It is part of the culture because it works in reverse too. Assuming there actually was as many people as they would have you believe died in the Holocaust as did die, why did they never revolt? You will never see a Jewish George Floyd. You'll never see that. You will never see a Jewish Rodney King. You will never see a Jewish Trayvon Martin. You will never see a Jewish Alex Preddy. You will never see a Jewish Renee Good. Never. It's not in their culture. That's how they just walked to the trains with their own women and children. This was the men. They walked to these trains with their own women and children in their fancy fucking clothes, their suitcase, and their jewelry dangling. So if they'll just walk into it, like they'll just let you do on a mass scale, on a corpus scale, a corporate scale, just the body of them marching in, something in their brains thinks that like you would do that too. They'll just do this horrible, dastardly thing. And again, this is where you need a reminder, because when I say the Jews, I'm not talking about the real Jews. I'm not talking about St. Peter, Thomas, James, John, Bartholomew, Andrew. I'm not talking about Paul, Timothy, Titus. I'm not talking about the real Jews, the ones who fought and died for their Messiah, the ones who offered their lives and shed their blood for the future of the church as martyrs, those are the real Jews. I'm talking about those particular Jews who rejected their Messiah, who desecrated their own 10 commandments, who rejected and abandoned the God who had loved them and repeatedly exercised patience and had mercy on them. I'm talking about the Ben Shapiros of the world, not the Roy Showmans. Talking about I think it's Ellie Weiss, not the Edith Steins. Okay? I'm talking about the ones who abandon God, abandon faith, abandon the 10 commandments, abandon morals, and hand themselves over to the devil, who is a liar. Right? Isn't that what Jesus said? He was a liar and a murderer from the beginning. You notice the connection between lies and murder? That's God himself makes that connection. So pay attention to it. Ben goes on to say, the history since the destruction of the Jewish rule, which now we know didn't even exist, in Israel over 2,000 years ago, no state ever emerged until 1948. Well, guess what, Ben? It didn't emerge in 1948 either. It was handed to you, okay? It was the world of Christians who fought the war for you because, like we just said, you marched your families onto these fucking trains and into these chambers. You did that. That's your people. The Catholics and the Christians that were butchered in numbers that tower over Jewish deaths in World War II, the ones in the tens of millions, we didn't march ourselves onto trains. We didn't lead our families to the slaughter. It's not in our blood. We followed the Jewish God, Jesus. We followed the Messiah. We followed the King. So we don't do that. So you didn't control Israel 2,000 years ago. You didn't build the state of Israel in 1948. It was handed to you. You should show some gratitude to God and to the Christians that did that, because they have mercy, something the atheists like you could never have. It's not part of the hubris of being a race supremacist. Kind of like Epstein. Didn't really have that either, did he? So Ben goes on, and again, this is 25 years ago, okay? This is who he was, and it's still here today. It says, with the rise of Zionism, he has to complain first about Palestine. So he goes, it was not Palestine, quote, there was no state present, and the name Palestine was given to the land by the Romans. So it's like, conveniently, he remembers that part. He remembers that the Romans gave Palestine, okay, to the Philistines, the mortal enemies of the Jews. After they destroyed the temple that they ruled over 2,000 years ago. The Romans, it was their temple that they ruled over. They destroyed it. And then they gave their land to the Philistines because they were sick of your shit. So with the rise of Zionism, the nations of the world saw that the Jews needed the homeland that God had promised them millennia before. This is the religious Zionism that is inside of Ben Shapiro 25 years ago when he's a child. So now go back to today. When does he turn on J.D. Vance? As soon as J.D. Vance stops blowing Israel. When does he turn on basically everybody? When did he turn on Nick Fuentes? Oh, when Nick Fuentes started asking questions about Israel. That right? Remember when Ben Shapiro tried to assassinate Fuentes in the cradle? Right? When he was still in his crib? When he was barely 17, 18, 19 years old? Did Ben show mercy to Nick Fuentes? No. No, Nick asked questions about why are we sending all this money to Israel, and then Ben just started screaming bloody murder, anti-Semite. Just the irony, right? He pretty much turned on everybody. Joe Kent, the moment you no longer fall to your knees and open wide, ear to ear, with each side of your mouth for Israel, Ben Shapiro turns on you. He couldn't make it any more obvious, and he's been doing it for 25 years. In 1920, the British, who controlled what is today Israel and Jordan, allotted all of what is now Israel and Jordan to the Jews, confirming the Balfour Declaration. Soon, however, the British reneged on their promise, believing that the Arabs were a more powerful ally than the Jews, and that by establishing a Jewish state, they would lose Arab support. In 1922, the British lopped off 80% of the land already allotted to the Jews. So it's like he so quickly forgets. He's able to say allotted, so he knows it was given to them. First, it was given to them by God, who they betrayed. Then it was given to them in the 20th century. And by everybody who tried to give it to them, they betrayed them too. Nothing new under the sun. The rest of the article you don't really need to read, other than it's just this long piece. He never once says the word Muslim. He's very tactful at this time, at that stage in his career. It's all about Arabs. It's all about the Philistines, the Palestinians. So that was 25 years ago. It's the same today. Another interesting thing that I looked at was, found some articles. Here's one from September of 2005. It's after Ben Shapiro wrote the book Porn Generation, okay? Because what we have today is two things occurring at the same time. Ben turns on J.D. Vance, literally for no other reason than Israel, right? So now he's against him. But he does this other thing that he's gotten away with his whole life. And that's, he says, oh, condemn Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, and Candace Owens for defending Muslim pornographers. So then it's like, oh, okay, well, what do you think Ben's long-standing position on pornography has been? Well, it's actually always been, when it comes to talking, vehemently opposed to pornography, right? This is how they sell this Judeo-Christian value that doesn't actually exist. There is no Judeo-Christian. It used to be Judeo, now it's Christian. Judeo said no to their Messiah, who was the Christ, a Jewish term. It was Jews who built and ran that church at first, until the Gentiles were invited in. So those are all the real Jews, all the good Jews, the ones who didn't lie and betray. They didn't lie and betray each other. They didn't lie about and betray God. They didn't falsely accuse. They didn't pay other people to falsely accuse and beg for a revolutionary who ended up getting everybody killed and the temple that they loved so much destroyed. None of that. But you have this book that Ben writes back, in the early 2000s, where he would give you the impression that he's against pornography. He's outspoken for over 20 years about the evils of pornography. But surprisingly enough, and this is the nuance of the snakes. When I watched Nick Fuentes talk about the TPUSA speech right after Charlie Kirk was killed, and then all of a sudden his enemies took center stage, and Nick described Ben like scurrying up to the podium. I can picture it because I've seen this type of thing before. I could picture Ben doing it. I've seen Ben speak live to a group of Catholics ready to give them their money. I didn't, but I've seen these types of things, and it's all part of this massive deception because everything's nuanced. It's I'm super against pornography. However, you cannot make it illegal. And if you're a reasonable person, you would ask, like, why? If you are so vehemently opposed to pornography and it is so destructive to the nation, why wouldn't you just outlaw it? Isn't that what we do with drugs? Don't we do that with drugs? Don't we heavily regulate legal drugs? Like if you have any sort of Schedule II narcotic, like Adderall or something else, and you want to go to a pharmacy with a legal prescription to purchase this legal pharmaceutical, to use it for an actual medical condition, it's super highly regulated. You got to have your ID. They keep track of it. You can't refill the prescription sooner than 2 days before it's out. It's this incredibly cumbersome process. It's become this incredibly bureaucratic process. It's super difficult to run it on a black market. Pretty sure the brand is made by Teva now, which unironically is an Israeli pharmaceutical compounder. Is that surprising? That they highly regulate businesses that they make money in, that are indistinguishable, cannot be differentiated from other potential plagues on society like fentanyl, cocaine, and other drugs that we do ban, like pornography, which we now understand scientifically, biochemically, physiologically produces the same effects as drug addiction, is just as difficult, if not more difficult, to overcome if you do become addicted, that can actually end your life the way that drug addictions can. But conveniently, he can't think of a way to regulate that, but does not believe that you should outlaw it. But now that you know that, you probably wouldn't be surprised to find out that neither does Benjamin Netanyahu think that you can outlaw it, even though he says that he thinks it's bad. They actually passed a law in 2016 in Israel that would have banned pornography by default from your ISP. If you wanted to look at pornography, you could do it virtually without restriction. You just had to call, email, or essentially contact the support for your ISP. Let them know you want them to unlock the porn for you. And then they do it without any scrutiny. They passed that law in 2016. It just needed to be ratified by the prime minister, who was Netanyahu. And then in 2018, he vetoed it. He put a stop to it. They almost had that done. So are you surprised to find out that the state of Israel also has Ben's same view about pornography? Or maybe you could say Ben Shapiro has the same view about pornography as the state of Israel does. He has the same view about pornography as Netanyahu does. And when I say the same view, meaning the view that the government can't do anything to stop it. He pretends to have the view that he hates it and thinks it's evil and that it's a sin, right? Because that's where he wrapped up this statement, right? He went all in. Judaism opposes pornography and finds it a sin, insists Ben Shapiro. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that convenient how that works? When you really think about it, do you think Ben Shapiro coming out and talking about, however vehemently, however passionately, okay, however emphatically, pornography is evil and he hates it and it's a sin, do you think that that has any influence on the pervasiveness, the rate of adoption or spreading, or the profitability of the porn industry? Of course not. Not in the slightest. Do you think Ben the guy who we're told is like a mastermind genius who's, writing for the Daily Bruin when he's 17 years old? Do you think he doesn't know? Doesn't he torture us with bullshit statistics every time he turns on his fucking microphone? Don't we have to listen to him in his wheezily, nasally voice, rattle off all these things like he's so much smarter than everybody else? You think he doesn't understand that statistically speaking, there's literally no argument against banning pornography whatsoever that doesn't also stand as an argument against banning drugs of any kind? Yet he can maintain that position for 25 years and nobody will call bullshit. The founder, the billionaire, the Jewish billionaire, who is the original creator of OnlyFans, probably the technology that served to accelerate the spread of retail level pornography production globally faster, more efficiently, and more profitably than probably anybody else could have thought of on the planet, is Jewish. And that Ben Shapiro will condemn pornography. He will even condemn OnlyFans, but he won't condemn the guy who founded it? Does that surprise anybody? This Leonid Radvinsky, this Ukrainian Jew who built this platform, this poison pill for an entire culture, and yet he doesn't want to condemn that guy by name, but he will condemn Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate by name. Not only will he condemn the Tates and condemn them because they are Muslim pornographers rather than the Jewish ones that he loves, he will even condemn the people who won't condemn them, which is how you got to this post on X about shame on Nick Fuentes, shame on Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson for defending Muslim pornographers. Anybody who believes that Ben Shapiro is opposed to pornography is an idiot. You are stupid. Your brain does not work. You should be banned from using a computer. You should be banned from talking to anybody about politics. You should be required to take a course on how politicians lie before you can even consume political media. Least of all should you be allowed to listen to Ben Shapiro and his kind. But I don't mean his kind as in like the weak Jews, because we already know the strong Jews were the ones who supported Jesus, stood by his side, and in the face of all opposition, threats of death, even death for pretty much all of the apostles except for John, they all stood by him. Those are the real Jews. I mean his people as in shameless, pathetic liars, grifters. And his is the worst grift of all because it's really big money and it's way more than just money. It's actually shaping policy and shaping views. This guy is not a conservative. What does he want to, what does Ben Shapiro promote that would conserve the Christian principles upon which the country was founded upon? Ben thinks that you can't ban pornography legally because it's kind of touchy in terms of the freedoms in the Constitution. But Ben doesn't care when states and municipalities all over the country are expanding the definition of anti-Semitism to include anti-Zionism. Listen to that again. Ben Shapiro has no problem with states and municipalities all over the country expanding the definition of anti-Semitism to include people who are anti-Zionists, Ben himself in 2001, 25 years ago, when he was 6, at UCLA, when he was a Bruin as a toddler, when he just had his first diaper change, and then had to switch between wiping shit off his ass and drafting his dissertation or his theses. He knew all the way back then that Zionism was nothing but a religion. It's not religious-like, it's a religion. It's God gave us that land. Somehow ignoring that, God took it away too, didn't he? I don't disagree with you, Ben. God gave it to you. The Lord gives, and he taketh away. And he tooketh away from you. Okay? He promised it to you. He gave it to you. He covenanted with you. You had promises you were supposed to make good on, and you didn't. And after so many times of forgiving you and letting it go, he finally said, it's enough. No more. No more Israel for you. Now it's Palestine. The Romans, who you begged to kill your Messiah, the ones whose authority you do recognize. You recognized their authority when you crawled on your knees and begged them to kill somebody who you falsely accused. You recognized their authority then. Well, you should also recognize their authority when they changed the name to Palestine. Okay? So yeah, God gave you the promised land. You fucked it up and he took it away. I don't know what else to tell you. That's the end of the story. The real Jews are now in Rome. Okay? So what all of you guys wanted, what all the Pharisees wanted, what all the Sadducees wanted, what you all wanted, your reason for killing Jesus because he was going to somehow ruin your dream to rule the world, guess what? All those uneducated Jews, the fishermen, the lower class, the poor, the uneducated, the sinners, guess what? They sit in Rome. Peter's buried in Rome. Peter is buried where Caesar used to be adored and admired and got stabbed to death. Peter's buried there with the most opulent, magnificent structures and architecture that the world has ever seen. All Catholic. Seethe all you want. God gave Rome. You guys rejected your promised land. Okay? You rejected Huntington Beach, and then God tried to give you Santa Barbara, and you said no. So we scooped it up. And we still got it to this day. And you know what? If we behave the way that the Pharisees and Sadducees did 2,000 years ago, we'll probably lose it too. So at least you know God is fair. So anyway, yeah, you'll never hear Ben Shapiro. In fact, Ben Shapiro, who says to you, oh my gosh, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, you guys are defending Muslim pornographers. Ben can't even gather the strength to really wholeheartedly and full-throatedly condemn Jeffrey Epstein. This is not a conspiracy theory. The suggestion that Ben Shapiro is anything other than an Israel propaganda machinist you can't even take it seriously. It's not even in good faith. He's literally nothing apart from that. He does not give a shit about the 10 Commandments. He doesn't believe in sin. He doesn't practice Judaism. He doesn't practice the 10 Commandments. You're not allowed to lie. And he doesn't accept his Messiah. So any Christian who listens to that guy, maybe it was understandable 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when the right wing was so desperate to not be, canceled and ostracized for saying anything even remotely rational, like, oh, families are important. Maybe you shouldn't go to college if you're a girl and rack up a body count of like 6,000. It might be counterproductive to your ability to bond or form a family or be a good mom or even a good person if you're going to whore yourself out for free, which actually just means you're just slutting it up. That they actually bought into this guy, and he's a total joke. And worse than that, he's just a liar. He's a liar. So people got to get their heads on straight. You got to get your heads on straight. We need to be able to see things for what they are. We need to have informed perspectives, and this information isn't hiding from anybody. It's pretty much straight out. It's out in the open. It's straight up. It's straightforward, and it's out in the open. So young men, especially Catholic men, not just whites, there are some very boss Black and Hispanic Catholics. I'm just going through big demographic groups here. So this is not like a white Christian thing. It's a Catholic thing. It's a universal thing. Christian principles from a universal perspective. Young men, like you're out there, the Daily Wire is dead. It doesn't matter if the business keeps running. It doesn't matter how much money they inject into it. The Daily Wire is dead because everybody knows they're just a bunch of grifting liars. Like, they are all mercenaries. They don't believe in what they're saying. They will condemn somebody ostensibly for, defying a value that you have as a voter, when in reality, they don't care about that value. They don't care about you as a voter, and they actually don't even care what this person did, except for whatever their opposition to their own principles are. And in the case of Ben Shapiro, that just means Israeli hegemony in not just the Middle East, I think in the planet, across the globe. Like, they don't care. They hate Catholics. You have to understand that. That's the one thing I will say for the Jews, then I'll wrap it up. I've got to be done here. It's gone really long because I did 15 minutes of a show without even realizing the mic wasn't on. Then another 30 minutes of the show, and I got exhausted, and it was just going to take a brief pause, but then ended up eating and everything else, and was super exhausted. Now I came back, it's been an hour, so this is going to end up being the longest thing yet. But I want to wrap up on this point. It's not simply a matter of, actually, I remember what the hell I was going to say. I just got so preoccupied with how long this was and begrudging the fact that, oh man, there's even another thing still to say. So let me just leave it at that. If you are a young man, a young Catholic, and you feel that zeal welling up from within you, from your depths, you care about society, you see the grave injustices taking place everywhere, you see race wars being stoked online, you see the gender wars being stoked online, you see the wars against the family and against values and against truth, properly speaking, just anything that's true, and you want to get involved and do something, the Daily Wire is dead. That brand is dead. There's a reason why people are gravitating to someone like Nick Fuentes, who, according to the woke ideology that they tried to, convert us or kill us, there has never been a convert or die more militant or violent than woke leftists. There are suicide bombers who will take off their vest in the face of a purple-haired, overweight lesbian for terror. Like, what if it doesn't kill her? There is no convert or die dogmatism more violent or aggressive than the left.
Bitch, are you gonna clean that shit up? Because I will smack you.
She's gonna smack you, ho.